The housing crisis really started with old ownership not applying funds to repair the building. It got in such a deplorable state, and with all the other financial problems, HUD decided to issue an abatement, which means they were going to pull the subsidy that subsidizes our rent. That was going to put us in a position where everyone would have had to leave. And being that we already had the housing shortage, that was just exacerbating the problem. I personally got involved because I took it personally. Wait a minute, I follow all your rules, I pay my rent, I'm not a problem. Why am I getting kicked out? Their answer was to issue vouchers to us that we could go anyplace else, any other affordable properties, and find apartments. Well, how is that possible when we have a shortage? So basically, once our vouchers ran out in 30 days, we had nothing. We were going to be homeless, living in parks and under bridges, which is illegal in Cincinnati. So we had to do something. So we reached out to Homeless Coalition, Legal Aid, the city of Cincinnati, anybody who would hear us, we reached out to and we partnered with. And as a result, it went all the way to federal court, but we sued HUD and we won. So not only did we win our housing for ourselves, all those vacant units that old ownership had never bothered to fix, they were all gutted, and we were able to house 200 heads of household and their children for at least 30 years, and that's a big win in my book. Devastating. It's devastating to think that people are in worse off position than we were when we were facing eviction through abatement. It was a horrible thing, not knowing from one day to the next whether someone was going to take your keys and tell you to get your stuff and get out. From one human being, I'm a compassionate person. I don't care who you are or where you're from, what your skin color is. You're human. You have certain inalienable rights. And homelessness is not an option. That is not an option. We need to have housing provided for everyone. Not everyone has the same requirement, but that's why we need a plethora of ideas.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. Mark. I'm the Director of Education here at the Greater Cincinnati Homeless Coalition. We are excited to have everyone here today to talk about how to talk about the housing crisis. Now, I would suggest getting out a paper and a pen or taking some notes, because we will be giving you a lot of pointers, talking points, and things like that, as well as a lot of information. This slide will be available, the slideshow will be available on our website at cincyhomeless.org on the How to Talk About the Housing Crisis page. And we'll talk more about that later as we go on. I am joined today with several people from AHA and the Homeless Coalition and Cincinnati Action for Housing Now. Welcome, everybody. I'm also joined by the Executive Director of the Homeless Coalition, Josh Spring, who will be speaking in a few minutes as we go along, and also be taking care of the chat. So if you have questions and things going on in the chat, Josh will keep an eye on that as well. So we're going to go ahead and talk about a lot of things today, and one of those is about affordable housing. So I would encourage everyone who has an Android phone or a tablet to go to the Google Play Store and download our Afford Rent Calculator, where you can put in rents as well as how much people make an income weekly, monthly, yearly, and it will tell you how much they can afford in gross income towards their rent. It's a very easy app to use, and I suggest checking it out because a lot of times people don't want to really get into it, deep into it, and the numbers and all that kind of stuff and doing the math. So this app does the math for you. So it makes it really easy. We also offer several trainings that cover all the topics that we're going to be covering today in depth. So I suggest if you're interested in any of those, you can contact us at the Homeless Coalition or go to our webpage, cincyhomeless.org, about education, and you can read about each of our trainings, including our Homelessness 101 training, our Affordable Housing 201 training, our housing protections and housing productions. And as an aside, we also offer in-person and virtual tours here in Over the Rhine that you can check out, both a historical tour and also what's going on today in terms of development here in Over the Rhine and beyond. So what I would ask you to do is check out our website to learn more about that, and also consider booking a speaker to come to your organization or to your school, because hearing someone's first person experience with homelessness can help us understand how we can move forward together. So we are going to be hearing some speeches today, and so Mona Jenkins is starting us out.
Good evening. Good evening. 5 years ago, Walnut Hills lost our grocery store, and instead of doing nothing, residents decided that we absolutely needed another grocery store and took it upon themselves to try to figure out that solution. We tried to contact several different other grocers. We were deemed to be too poor. Food is a basic necessity. We were deemed to be too poor to get another grocer. As a result, we started looking into a cooperative, and from that, Queen Mother's Market Cooperative was formed. We have been working for 5 years, doing community engagement, getting input from the community about their needs, while applying Band-Aids, solutions, and we are at a point, especially after the pandemic, where we have to have some sort of intentional solution for that. We're doing gardens, and out of those gardens, I'm going to switch over to housing, but I can't send the kids home with potatoes when they don't have a house to live in, to cook in, right? So we have to be intentional with where we are putting our funding. Food is a necessity, housing is a necessity, and unfortunately within our city and across this country, it is mostly affecting Black and brown and low-income folks. We can leverage this funding. We can leverage this to better jobs. We can leverage this to better opportunities, to better education, and to success for everyone. If that is what our goal is, and that is what you are supposed to do as elected officials, I'm telling you that supporting agencies like the Bethany House, the Cat House, Lighthouse, YWCA, who are providing housing services, closing the health gap, the co-op Cincy, who are building new jobs, and Queen Mother's Market and its food equity plan is a way to propel our folks into living. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona.
So thank you, Mona.
Gary,
we are very
Angela.
fortunate that we have several clips that we're going to be showing of people giving their 2-minute, kind of their elevator speech, if you want to think of it that way, in front of City Council during these budget hearings or in front of City Council meetings. Because the goal here today is to get you to feel comfortable enough that you're going to go out and have the confidence to be able to do this yourself. So if you think about it as an elevator speech, you want to keep that short because you're only on the elevator so long, and understand that there's probably not going to be an immediate response from the elected officials that you're speaking to. Sometimes they're not even really allowed to. So don't expect a response. Keep it authentic, right? So you want to make sure you're talking about your story, what you've gone through and what you've seen, right? Maybe you work at an organization, so you want to talk about some of the barriers that you've seen through that, but also using person-first language. That means when we talk about homelessness, that we're talking about people and families that are experiencing homelessness, families without a home, individuals living in outdoors instead of inside. So using that person-first language can show that you're an advocate for people who are experiencing homelessness. Also, it's really important to state the issues, be very clear of what the issues are and state the issue, and also to show the urgency, right? We are in a housing crisis, so you need to be able to convey that. Also understand that when you do this type of stuff, that it'll be out there forever, right? So even like this training, it's, live streaming, it's going to be out there forever. You can't really take it back. And I'm going to show you a clip of a time I spoke last year at City Hall, which I kind of wish I could take it back. So we'll kind of see some examples of things that maybe we shouldn't do. But also things we should do is use some of the talking points and make sure that you have like a call to action, a way to say, we want to make sure that people are have an idea of what you want them to do, right? What is the reason for you speaking today? So again, we're going to see several of these clips as we go through this training today, or this teach-in today. So I'm going to start giving you some talking points and some background, but I very much encourage you to check out our Homelessness 101 training. You can schedule that with me, with the Homeless Coalition, for your organization, for your group, for your families. We do these trainings virtually, so anywhere in the world, we'd be happy to do this. And in these trainings, we learn about the shelter system and how they work every day. And they don't really close their doors, but they're overflow capacity. So everyone cannot be served. And that's because of the affordable housing crisis, right? We need the housing. So when most families are turned away, what happens is that less than 25%, and this is a national statistic too, of people who could receive financial assistance for housing actually receive it. People often think that there's just public housing freely available, not understanding that there's wait lists and periods of time where you can actually apply, and a lottery system. Just understanding that most people who could qualify for housing assistance actually don't get it in this country. And that leaves elderly families, families with children, people with disabilities that don't have affordable housing. And we have seen the numbers of meals served during COVID have gone up, right? So we know that the need is still rising. And in Cincinnati, we lose over 1,000 Black residents every year. So that is something to also keep in mind, that when some politicians are saying, well, the increase, the city of Cincinnati population is increasing for the first time in 50 years, understanding that the Black population is actually decreasing. So keep that in mind. There's 3 ways that we can end homelessness, and that's with affordable housing, housing protections, and livable wages. So in terms of housing protections, we are sorely needed of housing protections in Cincinnati and in Ohio in general. So, but on top of that, we shouldn't be giving developers incentives to push out affordable housing in lieu of market rate housing. And unfortunately, our tax abatement structures, our TIF opportunities, as well as other benefits that the city gives in terms of public land and other types of funding, shouldn't be put in place just to attract outside developers like our abatement program was, just to turn affordable housing into market rate housing. And so I would encourage you to check out a video I did last year on hedge funds, homeownership, and Gen Z that is on YouTube. And it goes through and it discusses these issues very much in depth. So definitely check that out. It's on the Homeless Coalition's YouTube page, because what we're doing is we're encouraging developers and investors to come in and turn affordable housing into market rate housing. And that is displacing residents. So we also know that the pay to stay ordinance here in Cincinnati is not being enforced. So that's something that is a point that needs to be taken up with the county. We also need a county-wide mediation court for housing, not the housing court, quote unquote, housing court that's happening right now that is basically putting people out of their homes and taking properties away, but one that mediates so that tenants also have a voice in the process. And then also we need strong anti-discrimination protections and some sort of mechanism to enforce that. So there's other things that we can do, and I would encourage you to check out Housing Protections 301 because we go in depth, but we go all the way back to the Civil War and talk about how the laws have changed over the years and what housing protections are available today. So definitely check that out. And we also know that the value of work has gone down, decreased. So people are working harder and they are making less. And with the minimum wage increased this year to $9.30 in Ohio, that still only means that someone can afford about $480 a month in utilities. And again, this is with their gross. This isn't what actually shows up on their paycheck, but in terms of their gross income, they can afford $480 a month. And that includes utilities and other housing costs. And so because of the value of work going down, people are working harder and they're getting less with that. And so because the low wage job sector is what grew the fastest, and Black Cincinnatians don't have upward mobility. We're in the rated like 73 or 74 out of 77 municipalities in the country and upward mobility for Black people. That's from that 2015 state of the Cincinnati, two separate Cincinnati's report. And so what that means is that, if you are born in Cincinnati and you're in poverty, over 75% of kids Black kids in Cincinnati are in poverty, then you're likely going to stay in poverty. So what happens is that those families then are not able to afford the median rent. So if you look on the right side here, you can see approximately 41% of Cincinnati households can't afford the median rent on a 1-bedroom apartment. So that's the household. So that could even be multi-family earners, right? And so because of this, we know that Cincinnati is a place where it's very difficult for Black and low-income families to find housing. And so one thing that I want you to consider, and we'll give you more talking points as we go along, but is to consider the audience. So when you are doing your presentation and you're talking, it's one thing when you're talking to your family and friends about affordable housing. You have time, you can talk about it and then get mad and come back and talk about it later, right? So there's that back and forth. But often with the city council meetings, you really are just given your 2 minutes and that's pretty much it. So you want to think about who are you talking to and kind of what kind of persuasive tactics are you interested in using. Some folks will kind of butter up the council and say, oh, y'all are so great. Thank you for having us, even though this is, our public space, right? Like we shouldn't necessarily be thanking them for letting us speak. But that's a type of persuasion, right? Just kind of appealing to them. Thinking about, some people using humor to kind of break down those barriers and make people feel like they're feeling pretty good about themselves, right? You could use like self-depreciation and humor or whatever, but flattering people, all that kind of stuff. Those are kinds of persuasive techniques that we use every day, right? Like we're not always conscious of them, but we are doing that. But we want to be careful to not use things that are like scapegoating or just saying, oh, well, this is a new idea, so it's going to be the best, right? Like it's brand new stuff. So just kind of keeping in mind, who is your audience and how are you going to connect with them, right? So it's about connecting with your audience. And you might just be thinking, well, this city council meeting is going to get shown 5 times on city cable. So maybe the audience is the, Cincinnati residents who are watching this on city cable, right? So you could think about your audience in multiple different ways. And obviously, if it's a council meeting or a committee meeting, the committee might be focused on a specific topic. So you think about the audience in that way, or the budget hearings, think about who's the audience, right? So the recommendations, council, the mayor, the city manager, they're all involved with that budget process. Also consider your tone and your speed, right? If you speak too fast, if you, kind of are angry, that kind of tone might like come off as like, oh no, this person's just angry. And some people shut down, right? Like some people will just shut down if they hear somebody just kind of being angry as they go along. So kind of keep that in mind, also think about like what kind of background information do they need to know? Do they really need to know that, you know, you ran into somebody who has been here for 20 years who said this, that, and the other, or is there some other thing that you can give them a little bit of background and then kind of bring them up to speed? And then also the formalities, right? So are you able to speak to them, you know, as like, you know, Mr., Mrs., like, you know, council member? Are you supposed to say honorable? Like, you know, kind of understanding like what are those meetings and how are they run? Like, you know, the president of the meeting, right? Like those kinds of things. So those things can be, you know, interesting to do, but, you know, it's really about what you're going to say, right? So being prepared for what you're going to say, and knowing that as soon as they call your name, you want to be ready. So either that's walking up to the microphone, that's you're ready on Zoom. There might be a delay from city cable in real life on Zoom. So you just want to be on Zoom and close your city cable, but just be ready to go, because that's, you only get so much time, and you just want to be ready. And always, you know, start with the most important stuff.
Hi, I'm Susan Gregson, and I'm also with the Democratic Socialists of Cincinnati. I'm here to talk specifically about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And as all of you know, there is an incredible gap in the availability of housing for thousands of our lowest income citizens in Cincinnati. And while I appreciate the mayor and the city manager's budget that talks about affordable housing over 13 times, there's very little here in the way of changes that would actually fund that Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The $5.6 million in the proposed budget is the same amount that was spent this year, and the other mentions of affordable housing are all related to tax abatements and exemptions that are being given to many developers in the name of affordable housing for housing units that aren't actually affordable to people making minimum wage. So DSA, as Haley said, would like you to consider allocating 20% of the American Rescue Act funding that comes in over the next period of time to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We also think that the budget money allocated toward consultation on a public safety facilities master plan should be diverted instead to a public housing master plan. We would argue that the city council should define affordable housing at 30% of the minimum wage and pledge not to give tax abatements or exemptions to developers unless they actually make affordable housing that's affordable. Finally, we encourage you to, as city council members, you have the power to put the new Affordable Housing Trust Fund on the ballot in November. Please do that.
Thank you, Susan.
So as you can see, you know, you only have 2 minutes and they're going to cut you off. So you want to say the most important things first, because that's what they're going to listen to first and last. That's what I learned in education, right? People will remember the first stuff and they'll remember the last stuff. Everything in the middle gets a little bit blurry. So that's why this presentation will be available on our website. So advocating, you know, who are you advocating for? You know, what is it that you're looking for? Why are you doing this advocating? And how can it be done? What is the ask? What is the lift you are asking for? And then thinking about it differently, lobbying too, right? So, you know, who are you, you know, coming in front of everybody and saying, hey, this is what, as a citizen, this is what I'm looking for, what I'm looking for, and then how do I do that? How do I get in front of city council? How do I get in front of the committees? How do I do this? You know, making sure that you understand that you might have to sign up a day ahead of time, right? So before you go to, if you want to sign up on Zoom to talk to city council, you basically have to do it a day before, but you can go in person and fill out the piece of paper, right? So understanding like the how to do it is also important as well. And on our website, we have the how to talk about the housing crisis, and we have links and information on there about how to talk at city council meetings, how to talk in committee meetings, and so that you just can click on it and sign up, right? Okay, why is this clicking? All right, so, oops, how not to talk about the housing crisis. So don't want it to be abstract or too complicated or things running on top of each other. You want to avoid some of these logical fallacies like saying, well, if we didn't have the streetcar, we could use this for affordable housing, right? Like you shouldn't be creating this like false dilemma, like, you know, that, oh, this thing is this 0.01% of the budget is the problem, right? You know, we all know that the problem is that we knew that the sewers were a problem in 1940 and we did nothing about it. So now we're spending all this money, most of our funds towards the sewer system. We know some of the bigger problems. So just understanding that some of these, I wonder why it's like that, but some of these logical fallacies can be avoided if you just stay on topic and stay focused and stay, you know, on the idea of what is the action that you want to see happen. And you don't want to get into like hyperbole or false dilemma, you know, just saying things like, well, nobody on this council cares about affordable housing or nothing is being done, right? Doing that kind of, you know, throwaway language isn't very effective because it turns people off. You know, there are folks that have been elected who think they're doing something. You know, they think that the policies that they're suggesting or the meetings that they're convening, they think that that's doing something. So if you say nobody cares or something like that, then that's just going to turn them off, right? So you don't want to kind of throw that on there. And also not to make it just like oversimplified, you know, just saying, well, this is the answer, right? Because we know the answer is complicated, and you know, affordable housing, housing protection, livable wages. I mean, that's multiple fields that are going to be something that we need to work on. So understanding that it is more complicated, but one thing is you can check this out on our publications page on cincyhomeless.org. This is about how to spot fake news. And so I kind of just cut that up that we did. So I'm going to show you a clip of me that I did last year, and this is what not to do. Like seriously, don't do this. I made it overly complicated. It didn't come off very well. You do not need to have numbers and stuff like this. This is a cautionary tale, so don't do this. This is like what not to do, right?
Must man.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't start that.
Hello. I would like to say, please halt the vote on Elm and Liberty today. Just to give you a little bit of background, in 1985, we had 5,520 units of low-income affordable housing in Over the Rhine. By 2002, we were down to 5,200 units of low-income affordable housing in Over the Rhine. The 2002 study asked that 50% of all new builds would be affordable from 0 to 60% AMI. And that was based upon the idea that we could have a mixed income neighborhood that did not displace residents that were there, which we know has not happened. Fast forward to 2018, 50 years after the Fair Housing Act, which was designed, Fact 50 is designed to reverse redlining. In 2015, there were just 2,216 units of low income 0 to 60% AMI in Over the Rhine. That means that there was a loss of over 2,300 units of 0 to 30% from 2002 to 2015. Affordability means that you just pay no more than 30% of your income towards your housing. What that means is that for every $10,000 that you earn, you can afford $250 towards your rent and your housing. In Cincinnati, the area median income is much lower than the regional average, which is determined by HUD, which puts affordability about $50,000 for a family of 4. For a unit to be considered affordable, that would be 0 to 60% AMI. That's what affordability means. 60 to 100% AMI is called workforce housing. So that would mean that in our region, to be affordable, a 0 to 60% AMI, an apartment would have to cost equal to or less to $1,220 a month, which is still very high, and most people in the city of Cincinnati cannot afford that. We do education programs at the Homeless Coalition. I encourage you to check.
Yeah, see, that was just a mess, right? Like we didn't need all that mess. We didn't need all those numbers. We didn't need the papers that were not flipping okay. We didn't need the numbers that are actually not exactly correct, right? Like going back, I'm like, oh, that number's not right. And these my mathematical, right? You don't need to make it complicated, right? We just want to keep it simple. So when we do that, when we keep it simple, we know that there's a problem, right? We know that there's 28,000 units from our 2017 report from LISC knows that there's 28,000 units short, which means that thousands of families are paying more than 30% of their income towards their housing, which is putting them in the survival mode, right? We just need to make sure that we can survive. And in Hamilton County, more than half of the Black families are paying more than 30% of their income towards their housing. This disproportionately affects Black, Appalachian, and LGBTQ people and the housing crisis in general, and people with disabilities. And then we know that lives are cut short by homelessness. Every year we do our memorial, and we know that, last year was over 150 people that we know about, right? That whose lives are cut short. So basically we want to make sure that people have the ability to have stable communities, stable family, so that we can plan for the future and have a higher quality of life. So in our Homelessness 101 training, and we're going to hear from Melissa on this video really quickly, but one thing I want you all to keep in mind is the different types of homelessness, right? So when we're talking about homelessness, we are talking about people who are couch surfing. We are talking about families who are doubled up. We are talking about people, those folks who never get into the system, right? Who are never counted every year through the PIC count, or they never make it into the homeless management information system, right? So there are over 25,000 people in Hamilton County who experience homelessness every year, and the most of them never end up as part of the system or get services. And so keeping that in mind, Melissa's going to just really quickly talk a little bit about this and her idea and understanding of what it means to be.
I know when it involves different types of homelessness, we experience most commonly the doubling up. We lived with my aunt so many times, and that's her 4 kids, her dogs, her husband, and that's me, my mom, my 2 sisters, and my brother living in her house. The thing about the phrase doubling up is it's really a cushy kind of way for saying one family is experiencing homelessness. And that was usually my family. We have gotten evicted because the water was cut off, and the water was getting cut off, and my mom had to make choices between paying the water and paying the rent, thinking that she would be able to get up the money for the rent, but we couldn't be without water. We have had to take plastic trash cans of water from my aunt's house to our house just to have water and a place to stay, because throughout my life, we were just moving in with my aunt. I was just moving in with my sister. I was just moving in with my boyfriend. But really, the facts are that I was experiencing homelessness for much of my life, and the lives of my siblings and my mom as well. And Dr. Mark, you were talking about 30% of your income making housing affordable. My mother at many points was easily paying 85 to 90% of her income towards just housing us. And it's really a devastating thing. I mean, my mother, we were on public assistance, and my mother, the same day she would get the money from public assistance, that afternoon we would have to go to the pantry, the local food places, to get food, because after paying the rent and the utilities, there was nothing left for food. So I believe that's important for people to know.
Awesome. And if you want to hear more of Melissa's story, please contact us. She does a great in-person and Zoom, better lighting now that we know what we're doing with Zoom, better lighting now. So please do contact us, and also with our trainings too. So she's a facilitator for our 101 and 201 trainings as well. So we know that we have needs both in housing, but also throughout the community. We have needs when it comes to the fire department, they need to update their equipment. They have unsafe firehouses, not using parts of it because of the safety issues. And we have the oldest municipal fire department, right? And so we need to make sure that we're respecting that history there. But we also need to update our recreation facilities for the 21st century, right? We need to have multi-generational recreation facilities. So the Homeless Coalition and our partners are working together to make sure that when we increase our affordable housing, but we're also increasing the safety of the neighborhood and really the future, right? We're looking at the rec centers as our future, our future health for our children. And as we get older, right, we want to make sure that we have spaces that we can use that are good for us as well. So this is what we're doing better together. But I also wanted to show you this because it's important to think of where we came from. Now, in 2015, when I started the coalition, 2016, there was no affordable housing trust fund in the city of Cincinnati. And so we knew that we needed to focus on that. So AHA, Affordable Housing Advocates, started convening people from all over the country who have worked on affordable housing trust funds. And we wrote the language to put to City Hall. And unfortunately, only one part of that came through in 2018, which was to create the fund, but not the oversight to the folks who could spend the money. And also it didn't have a dedicated funding source. So this is why we're still fighting for the dedicated funding source and for the community control of the board. So over the years, we have garnered attention and given information to community councils, so many civic organizations, the Women's Club, just all across the board, we've been very active about making sure that people know the importance of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And last year in 2021, in 2020, we started collecting signatures to get it on the ballot to change the city's charter. And we collected over 9,000 signatures during the first year of the pandemic, which was an amazing feat. And several folks here helped collect those signatures. Thank you, because that really forced City Hall to say, wait a second, let's try to do something about this. It might be smoke and mirrors, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. But at least people were saying, okay, this is an issue. We need to do something about it. And we never stopped. We kept moving forward, and we listened to the criticism that came out last year. And part of that was saying, look, we want to have a dedicated funding source that's already picked out before it goes to the ballot, right? And so this 0.3% restoration of the earnings tax is the way to do it. And what that means is that a couple years ago, we lowered our earnings tax when SORTA was transferred from the city to the county, and then the county sales tax is being used for transportation with SORTA and Metro and building bridges and roads and all that kind of stuff with the sales tax. So it dropped down, our earnings tax in the city dropped down by 0.3%. So we are saying that we would like to restore that 0.3% that was added, I think in the 1970s. It was like a big deal when it happened. They didn't think they could ever get support for the bus, but add that, which doesn't even bring us to our max in the city, or the cities in the state of Ohio can get 2.5%. And what this would do is it would create a well-funded affordable housing trust fund that will be used to create and sustain affordable housing that will stay affordable forever. And that's what's so important, is that we want to make sure that the affordable housing is consistent and it's safe, but also that people are comfortable and don't feel like they're just going to lose their housing. So this must be voted on, this change of the city's charter, but city council has the ability to put it on the ballot. So one of the things, the talking points right now is telling city council to put it on the ballot, because they're only going to meet a couple more times in June and then once in August, because they take off in July. So we need to make sure that they understand that they can put this on the ballot themselves, and that they should just put it on the ballot. We can't wait. And so if you go to actionforhousingnow.com, you can check out more information, sign up, and all that kind of stuff.
Good evening, y'all.
Good evening.
How you doing?
Good.
Doing all right. That's good. I'm glad y'all are doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good too. I could be doing better. I'm Rico Blackman, working at the Greater Cincinnati Homeless Coalition. I talked to a few of you a few times already, and the one thing that I will continue to hammer down is the need for more affordable housing and the need for better food equity playing here in Cincinnati. The one thing that hurt my heart yesterday is I got a call from someone that was in Kentucky that asked me, if we had any housing. A lot of people think that we got housing at the coalition, and unfortunately we don't. But I wish we did. I wish we had more housing in Cincinnati. And they called asking for housing for two kids. And I'm like, how old are they? He said 14 and 17. Now, I asked him, I said, okay, how you call Lighthouse? How you call the shelters? He said he did all that and still nothing. And so now I'm wishing that he's able to find some housing for them. And if he's able to find some housing, hopefully he'll be able to stay in some good housing. Some housing that's safe, that's effective, and that's available for all of us. As we've seen in the Black community, only 59 units of the 1,280 units that's been developed by our city is available and affordable to Black people under the median income. All I'm asking for is the ability to vote for more affordable housing units in the ballot for November. We collected 9,500 signatures. We can collect more, but we asking you because we want your support and we want your help. Children are dying. Children cannot stay in housing anymore. We need more here in Cincinnati.
Thank you, Rico. Nicole.
Good evening, y'all.
Good evening.
How you doing?
So we know that the housing crisis is affecting us. It's affecting us all in so many different ways, and it's creeping up on the AMI too. But what we know that can help solve this issue is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and it needs to be funded. It can be connected to other services, and it has to be community controlled so that it focuses on 60% AMI or less. And you can see here in the city of Cincinnati that 60% AMI is approximately about $35,000 a year. And so keeping that in mind, that's where the Affordable Housing Trust Fund should be focused, is on that $35,000 a year. And I'll talk about a couple exceptions to that in a few minutes. So this is actually from last year when we were working on the trust fund. And the thing about it is not much has changed in the past year. We might have a new council, we might have a new mayor, but they're still focused on the same ideas yeah. So what we need, sorry, it's a real thing, right? This gets a little bit frustrating at times because our plan has dedicated funds towards affordable housing at 0 to 60% AMI, that half the funds would be dedicated to 0 to 30% AMI, whereas the city does not have that. The funds are dedicated at 80% AMI or less, so they could possibly not be spent on affordable housing. Now, the original trust fund itself does have part of the legislation that it is on 0 to 60% AMI, but we'll learn in a moment that no money is actually spent from that trust fund yet. We also know that our plan has eviction protections in terms of just cause eviction, so that there would have to be a just cause for people to be evicted, that there's a livable wage guaranteed for the jobs that come out of this trust fund that is equity focused. So we're focused on Black and Appalachian communities that need the help the most. I mean, that's where we need to focus the money, and that the board would be controlled by community organizations and community folks rather than the real estate lobby or the big developers, and that it would be affordable forever. Much of the city documents just says maybe 10 years that it would be affordable. LIHTC has moved down to basically 15 years. So when we're thinking about long-term into the future, we need things to be affordable forever. And Josh just shared an ordinance that we got passed in 2018 in the chat. And so if you want to check that out, and we'll talk about how the city has kind of moved around that and tried to kind of subvert that. So this is we're about to watch a video from last year because the city, their claims, and part of it's true, is that they're just focused on making sure that people aren't paying more than 30% of their income towards affordable housing. But when my head, and what they're saying is that if you make $150,000, we want to make sure you're not paying, 30% or more for your housing. We really need to focus on the 0 to 60% AMI. And so they also, the city, including the new reports that have come out this year, they're using the AMI based upon our general statistical area, which is set by HUD. And it includes places like Indian Hill, and it goes all the way up to Oxford and down into Kentucky, right? And so the AMI is much higher from the federal level than it is in the actual city of Cincinnati. And so real quick, we'll watch this video, and it's going to be hard to hear.
Loan program that you can only build certain numbers at certain AMIs. This is something that the opponents or the supporters of issue 3 have criticized this for, I guess.
Well, I mean, it has to fall within. The units have to be affordable. It has to be 80% or lower, and at least 51% of the units. And beyond that, it's really up to the Housing Advisory Board and the policies that are established by the city.
So what she was saying was that they consider affordable 80% or less AMI. And sometimes you'll even see on their documents where they have affordable housing, quote unquote affordable housing, up to 120% AMI. And when that is considering the statistical area, I mean, we're talking about, a difference between $80,000 a year, which is our statistical AMI, and about $50,000 a year for the city of Cincinnati. So it's wildly different, right? I mean, that's nearly a 50% difference between that. And essentially, the city doesn't build affordable housing, okay? They don't fully finance affordable housing. What they do is at the end of a project, when a project's already got funded, they already have all the designs, they already got the builder set and all that kind of stuff, they'll tack on a little bit of money at the end, which they'll call like a gap financing or something like that, do the gap financing at the end. And so what I've learned, it says the city may not believe that the issue is urgent or may not understand what affordable housing is, who is building it, right? Because 3CDC does not build affordable housing. And so why do people think that? I do not know, but they don't understand who is building it and sustaining it and why it's important, but they clearly support market rate development. So I'll encourage you all to go to our YouTube page at the Homeless Coalition and check out the issue 3 teach-in from last year. If you want to go on the ins and outs of all this kind of stuff, I go really depth into it, including looking at what the city, and I'll show the city numbers, how they enumerate the number of affordable housings that they do. So one question that we got when preparing for this was, what about the zoning changes? And ultimately the zoning changes it will impact Black neighborhoods more. They do not require, the zoning changes do not require affordable housing, which is why they did not pass this year. According to the council members, they will amplify wealth. So what the zoning change means is that you would be able to turn a 2-bedroom apartment into 3 efficiencies at less than 300 feet, 300 square feet each. So the idea would be that every square foot would all of a sudden be more valuable to developers if these zoning changes were made. And so they would want to squeeze out as much money out of every square foot, which already happens. Zoning, density variances, height variances, these things are already granted to developers, and they do not create affordable housing. So unless there is an incentive or a requirement with the zoning changes to create and sustain affordable housing, it will not just happen with the zoning changes. Essentially, the zoning changes will likely increase the loss of housing. It'll actually make things worse because the displacement will accelerate. And so one thing I did on here was I just showed on a map where this is on the density and affordable housing video, which is on YouTube, where I showed on the map where the zones that they want to change are, and then also where the Black residents in Cincinnati are. And when you put the maps on top of each other, it's basically like the same areas, right? And we have a new council that's talking about equity, it's talking about racial equity. We have to understand that when we have things like this, like these proposed zoning changes that are literally an overlay on the Black community, that not only is there a historical reason for that and a contemporary reason, but we have to look to the future about how we would want to change that. So I guess here's the two maps side by side here, where you've got the Black folks living in the blue, where the blue dots are. And you can see how it pretty much just overlays upon itself. So, and that's not by randomness, right? Like that's by design, right? That's because of redlining. That's because of anti-Black racism in the suburbs, right? You know, the discrimination, housing discrimination has caused this. So one thing, you just go ahead and check that video out, and you'll learn some more about that. We go to the next one, thank you. So on the current trust fund, we have not spent $1 on that since 2018. They just convened the oversight board recently, and they don't know exactly how much is in it or how many different trust funds there actually are. So the city has created multiple trust fund accounts, and maybe that's to avoid the accountability of the requirement of 0 to 60% AMI, I don't know. But knowing that there are multiple accounts now, that the major funds that were promised, if you've heard about the Section 108 loan pool and that, you know, that CDF is gonna administer and all that kind of stuff. We've done that before. And I talk about that in the issue 3 teach-in, and I give you examples, because that Section 103 loan is it Section 108 or 103? Sorry. But that federal loan is not required to go towards affordable housing. And the only requirement that was put on it was the video we just saw from the former city manager, who said that it's 51% of that fund is to go to 80% AMI or less. So literally that 35 million that they keep talking about, only 51% is supposed to go to housing at 80% or less, which means that 0 of it could go towards affordable housing, $0. Because if they do 80% AMI for all the projects, guess what? You created no affordable housing. So understanding that when the city said, oh, we got this 35 million coming from the feds and we're going to do this and all that kind of stuff, that the reality is that not one penny of that money is required for affordable housing. And we can look at like the Race and Fourth and Race Tower that was used with the previous Cincinnati fund, right? So it can build parking garages, it can build businesses, it can build luxury housing. There's no requirement on that 35 million. That's actually a loan for future community block grants. It's a loan, that loan, none of it is required to go towards affordable housing. Whoa, we're going fast here. I just wanted to make a note too, when people say we need housing at all levels, that's really the all lives matter of housing. Because the reality is once you're making over $60,000 a year, there's a surplus of available houses in Hamilton County, or available places to live. The greatest need is that families making $35,000 or less. And in Ohio, with our minimum wage, you make $19,000 a year, working full-time, 40 hours a week, $19,000 a year, which means that you can afford $483. Again, this is pre-taxes though, right? But that's how it's gross income. That's how affordability is determined, $483, including utilities, right? So that is where, we need to be, is focused on where it's hardest to make affordable housing, and that's where the city subsidy should be. Most of the city subsidies, over 90%, go to luxury housing. Like, how many granite countertops do we need to buy, right? Understanding that our subsidy is going to the wrong place. And this, we need housing at all levels, turns into reality when we give, Eagle Realty pricey apartments incentives, or that, we just keep approving these abatements for these high rate market rents, apartments and stuff, or condos. That's not where the subsidy should be. If the subsidy needs to be where it's hardest to make the affordable housing work, right? So our subsidy should be at the 0 to 30% AMI. So just really quick, Josh is going to talk here in a second, but one thing that, I pointed out in the, this is from the issue 3 teach-in. And what I did was I took the 2019 Notice of Funding Availability, which is the city's program to do affordable housing. And I made this all out and all that kind of stuff. And one thing that they claim is that they create 350 units that the city itself creates. And by they, I mean the city manager and other folks that say that the city itself creates 350 units of affordable housing every year. Well, in 2019, these were the money where the NOFO went to, and the $1 million projects for arts apartments, which is buildings that already existed, right? So these were already, for the most part, I mean, some families were making too much when it moved to LIHTC, but for the most part, this was just organic, affordable housing that now has a LIHTC credit part of it. So it has to remain affordable for a certain amount of time and all that kind of stuff. The developer gets upfront money for that. So those are not new units. The Willkommen project is a scattered site project in Over the Rhine that uses the Fact 50 money to build that. And already existing affordability contracts on buildings that were renovated to turn into market rate were moved to other organizations to extend existing units. So we actually lost units due to that. And then also the Alaska Ave project, I couldn't figure out what the affordability level is, but since it's home ownership, that's generally like going to be at the 80 to 120%. And so I took that out there. So the 350 that they claim every year really gets down to 24 units that they put in, their percent contributions, like, a percentage of the actual project. So the city itself does not create affordable housing, just like 3CDC does not create affordable housing, right? But for some reason, there are these wild claims about what the city does with this. So we've got a video here.
This coalition, as we've said over and over, in our city, we are short 28,000 affordable homes. And the numbers just roll and roll around in my head, but what is also there more prominently are the people. And so sitting there getting ready to get up here, I was in my mind's eye. I remember the first time I got a call to come look at the body of someone who had died outside. He was laying at the end of an on-ramp amongst garbage, stiff. I remember the woman who gave birth to her child in a porta potty by the Bengals Stadium. I remember the children that have shown up to our office and fallen asleep under our desks because it's hard to sleep in a car. And I look at that and I say, what are we doing? And I want folks to know that most of the talk that has come out of the city about affordable housing is actually about housing that's not affordable to most people who need it. The $34 million that we've heard talk of is a loan that we haven't even been approved for. We'd have to pay it back. The money that the mayor has held press conferences about isn't even in the trust fund. It's not even allocated to be in the trust fund. So put at least 40 million of this ARP funds into the trust fund. Vote to put housing back on the ballot. If we continually have this problem, people are dying, you have tens of millions of dollars in your hands you can put to do something about it, and you don't, what are we supposed to think?
Thank you, Josh.
So Josh is here with us today, and he is going to give us some information and help us understand, give us some clarity on this issue. Welcome.
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for being here. Very thankful that you're present. So Dr. Mark hit on some of this, but I think it's very important that we are clear about what is and isn't happening. So obviously there's a new city council, a new mayor, and so some of us have held some hope that this new council would be better than the last, and we still have that hope, and we're still working for that to be true. However, the talk that we have heard coming out of the city about affordable housing is misleading. So Dr. Mark mentioned the $34 million in HUD 108 loan. We're told that this money is in the trust fund or would be in the trust fund. One, it's a loan we've applied for. We haven't even been approved for it. Two, it's not obligated to be spent on affordable housing. Three, we would have to pay it back, which means you have to charge rents high enough to be able to pay back a loan. Four, if we didn't pay it back, it would just it would come out of future allocations of what's called community development block grant funds, which are other HUD funds. So in short, we'd be potentially borrowing money early to maybe build affordable housing. We've heard talk of $15 million in private donations. As far as we know, those monies haven't been received by anybody. They also would be in the form of loans that have to be paid back. City Council last year, or beginning of this year rather, voted to put $5.15 million of $280 million American Rescue Plan funds into housing. $5 million of that to the quote unquote Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and $150 million for yet another plan. And all of those, everything I just listed off, was started by the previous administration. It's not new. None of that is new. None of that is based on the hope of a new administration. That is all old stuff from the previous administration. And none of it, if you read the actual ordinances, none of it is set to go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. In some cases, they've written Affordable Housing Trust Fund after the allocation, but the real trust fund, and it's in the ordinance that I shared with everybody, is Fund 439, and it has stipulations on it for that the money has to be spent where it is most needed. And so by disregarding that or sending it to some other fund, those stipulations can be avoided, and they make it look like it's still going to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund because they put the words in there. So reading the ordinances is very important. And then finally, the two new things that this council has done is to say that at the end of a fiscal year, if we have surplus funds, city council can vote to put those surplus funds into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund if we have surplus funds and if city council votes to do so. And then finally, the mayor held a press conference about a month ago to announce $300,000 being put into a home ownership program, $300,000. And so it is really important to dig deep, to question, and to, and the last thing I want to say is this difference that Dr. Mark pointed out in AMIs, area median income, between what the city is using, the metropolitan statistical area, and the county is very significant. So when you hear the city saying, well, we're building housing that's affordable at 60% AMI, it's actually more like 85% AMI in the county. It's even worse if we compare it to the city. And so the result is, of all of this, is we're really not right now, we're really not putting anything significant into affordable housing. As a city, we're not building affordable housing. We've got the words there, but the truth doesn't back it up. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh, for that. We really appreciate it. So we do know that we were asked to give some talking points for this. And so we're going to have some talking points. We're going to listen to some more people at the budget hearings this week as we go along. And again, this will be available on our website. So you can take notes now or you can check it out later. So one thing that when we were working on the campaign that always came up was, how can we make the communities more stable through affordable housing? And we know that when people are forced to move, instability is obviously following them. So one thing that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund will do is stabilize neighborhoods. And so long-term residents can be there. So we get a multi-generational folks staying in the community and not being just pushed out because they become on a fixed income, making sure that we are stabilizing our communities. We also know that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, as we've written it, matches the need. So we know the need is greatest for folks at the 30% AMI, the 30 and 60% AMI, so up to about $35,000 a year. So there is an exception with the home ownership. So that would be maybe a little bit higher for the AMI because we also don't want people to get into home ownership that can't afford that as well. So just kind of keeping that in mind. So it should be a video.
Today I'm just here on behalf of Bethany House. Just wanted to say thank you as I was recently homeless. I'm a single father raising my son alone in the last 3 years. And recently in the last year and a half, I've had surgery on my right hand, my left behind my ear, been in the hospital for my heart 3 times. And that's not to mention the doctors for psych reasons and all that. But I do have 6 doctors, so many, in fact, I have an app for that. Anyway, I just wanted to, make sure everybody knows how important it is to be able to hold on to things, because at a point in time, I burned through a lot of my savings when I ended up homeless here recently, just trying to stay in hotels and figure things out. I had a kind of a past 2015. Haven't been in any kind of trouble since then, especially since my son's born. But it's held me back like a lot. They'll take your application fee, but they won't take you. So that kind of sucks. But I was getting discouraged. I was getting down. I was worried I was going to lose my son. And then, I just kept talking to different people, trying to figure things out. And then finally, the Bethany House, man, they swooped in at the last minute. And now, within the first week, they had my son in school again, and that was awesome. I was able to get him in early learning classes and go right back to work, which was amazing. That was a big reason why, I wasn't able to, there's the whole thing about that too. But anyway, now I'm just a couple days away from having an apartment and another opportunity at an even better job. So, if it wouldn't have been for them, I'd have been lost, and I might have lost my son as well. I just wanted to say
when we are advocating, it could be our own story. We could be talking about it from a perspective of an organization, and it could be about human service funding, right? That is always up for debate. And one thing that we want to remember is that when they created the 1.5% of the budget going to human services in the 1980s, that was meant to be a minimum, right? So that was not meant to be that this is the max amount, and if we hit 1.5%, we're doing it right, right? That was supposed to be the minimum. They should be spending a minimum of 1.5%. And we know organizations like Bethany House and Lighthouse and Lydia's House and the Cat House, all these places need more funding to address this problem because there is not enough affordable housing. So the urgency is great. We know that 150 people more than that, definitely their lives were cut young last year. So on the shortest day of the year, the longest night in December, around December 21st, we do a memorial at Washington Park, and we honor the folks that we have lost, both folks that are experiencing homelessness, but also service providers and people in the community. So look out for that in December, and please join us. The shelters, the doors never close, right? They're open 24/7, but because we don't have the livable wages, we don't have housing protections, and we don't have affordable housing, we're still in a overflow capacity. So understanding that we need dedicated funding towards affordable housing is important.
Good afternoon. My name's Peg Fox. I'm the Executive Director of the Metropolitan Area Religious Coalition of Cincinnati, and also sit as a board member on the Affordable Housing Advocates, as well as the Emergency Shelter and Housing Program for FEMA on the Community Advisory Board. The Metropolitan Area Religious Coalition of Cincinnati, as an interfaith coalition, works to improve public policy and in the process, civic discourse. MARCC has worked and continues to help shape policies that provide dedicated public dollars for affordable housing. MARCC recommends that the City of Cincinnati budget priorities, policies, and actions include the following to make affordable housing a reality for its residents. Dedicate substantial public funding to the already existing City Housing Trust Fund, referred to as Fund 439, established by the City Council in 2018. Begin substantial financial investment to the fund by transferring $40 million of 2022-23 American Rescue Program funding into Fund 439. Commit to an oversight process for the Housing Trust Fund, whose focus addresses low and moderate income residents using an eligibility formula based on Hamilton County average median income. Begin serious discussions of the most responsible way to dedicate a portion of the earnings tax as an annual public funding mechanism to the Housing Trust Fund. This mechanism would generate substantial investment on an annual basis for additional affordable housing units. MARCC and Affordable Housing Advocates are right here, ready to work with City Council. Thank you very much.
And so, one thing that we also have to remember is that with a directed affordable housing trust fund, it can work in an equitable manner to address institutional racism, to address historical racism, address housing inequality, housing discrimination. So it helps stabilize the communities. And then also, we were really clear to make sure that we looked at accessibility issues and visibility issues, as well as, the whole green, I'm trying not to freak out about climate change, so I'm just going to leave it. But, understanding that we have very big, a big lift when it comes to climate change and green building, and LEED and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Paul Hafner, President and CEO of Lighthouse Youth and Family Services, also a proud member of the Human Services Chamber, as well as the Homeless Coalition. At the outset, please know that Lighthouse is extremely grateful for the human services funding that we've received in the past, and as well as for this significant increase that's been proposed in the current budget. We need this critical support as it helps defray the costs of our Meekum House Teenage Shelter, our Shakely Center Young Adult Shelter, and our Street Outreach Program. Typically for Lighthouse, this support ranges in $60,000 to $90,000 range annually. Now, regarding our Shakely Center for Youth, this is the 18 to 24 young adult shelter in Cincinnati. We are a national model for how to do shelter. This came out of the Homeless to Homes program. Lighthouse opened that shelter in 2012, and we greatly expanded the shelter in 2018. So we now have 36 individual bedrooms, and many of you have seen this beautiful facility. The problem is we operate that Shakely Center at approximately an $800,000 annual deficit that we fundraise for. We had a 5-year campaign, and our wonderful donors provided us with a significant operating cushion, but that is in tapering mode. So that $800,000 annual deficit will actually grow every single year if we do not work hard and ask our city and county for support. So we have provided you a letter seeking $150,000 of additional support for our Shakely Center for Youth. It's just a difficult truth that young adults do not get the same kind of support that children do. Government funding is difficult to find, so we're asking our city for this important support. And we also appreciate all of the hard work that you guys have done and the city manager's office have done, and appreciate the meet and greet today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
So we need to make sure that funds are dedicated towards affordable housing, and that could be, permanent supportive housing. It could be a lot of different types of affordable housing, but at 0 to 60% AMI for the city, maybe for the county, but for the city, the AMI for the city, and not for market rate housing, which is anything above 60% AMI. So just that is something that we need to keep in mind, that it's dedicated towards affordable housing. So I'm encouraging everyone to go to actionforhousingnow.com and click on Knowledge Worth Having if you're looking for more talking points and more information that you might want to include on your talk. There's definitely statistics and information there under the Knowledge Worth Having part.
Good afternoon, y'all. How you guys doing today? Good. I'm doing all right. Of course, I could be doing better. Today started off kind of rocky. Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm going to dedicate these next 1 minute and 45 seconds to Black women, mainly because I'm a product of Black women, and I'm surrounded by incredible Black women that I would not be here without them. So earlier today, I was going to pick up a woman in Avondale to bring here and to speak to you all. But when I called her, she told me that she had lost her home. She was evicted today, and I was on my way to get her. She said, "Don't worry about it. I still have to figure out some things." And I cried. I was sitting in the car, and I couldn't figure out what to do next. But I bring that up because as a advocate for affordable housing, Black women are the ones that deserve it the most because they've been through the most, and they continue to go through the most and still overcome and still fight to this very day. I'm surrounded by Black women, my mom, my aunts, Mona Jenkins, all these women that made a positive impact in my life. And I think about Mona when I think about housing because she's currently experiencing homelessness. And so when we think about Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we need more money there. We need more money there. We need at least 50 million, but I'm asking for you all to put at least 40 million of the ARP funds into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And if we don't do that, I think about that kid that sat here. That kid is going to go and not be able to have a family or not have a house to live in because she's going to be wondering, where's my house at?
Thank you, Rico.
So just some final comments here, and we are going to open this up for discussion in a few minutes, but we are also going to go through some of the possible arguments that people might make against the trust fund here in a moment. But the idea is that we want to build and sustain affordable housing. More units are lost than are gained. There's not been a net increase of affordable housing, no matter what the city report says or what they're trying to say based upon demolition data or whatever. We know from our experience that we are losing more affordable housing than we are gaining. So don't let the city tell you otherwise, because it's absolutely not true. That what is true, though, is that the trust fund can help with rental and mortgage assistance, gap financing, which can bring down what people pay in interest and what organizations pay in interest, that it should be equitable and it should be responsive to the need. So once again, I included some AMI information on here where you can see the vast difference between the neighborhood of West End Black residents, white residents in the city total, Hamilton County, and the metropolitan area. These are what would be affordable at 60% for rent. So this does not include utilities, right? But this was what, if you included rent and utilities, what someone could afford. And you can see that it is completely different based upon this. So we'll make sure you check that out. If you want to take a screenshot of that, please go ahead and do that. But once again, we'll share this information. So we also want to make sure that you know where you can get information about what's going on at City Hall. So what I would do is I just type in City Council, Cincinnati Council calendar, and you're going to come up with this meeting calendar. So the calendar is where all the information regarding the meetings is located. So it's not necessarily like a calendar like you would think your Google Calendar, but this is where the different agendas are, and as well as like accompanying materials. So like if you want to really get into something, sometimes you can find like the PDFs. The agenda packet has like everything in it. If you're gonna like take time to download the agenda packet, you've got different like things in it, like exhibits and appendixes and all that kind of stuff. But you can just click on the meeting details and it'll show you what is in text. So then you can click on meeting details and then you can search for things like affordable housing, or actually up in here, I searched for affordable housing, but then you have to click into each one and then go ahead and search on that. And I just did this yesterday and I looked up what they've been talking about with affordable housing with the new folks since, they came in January, and there's basically nothing. There's really not been a focus on affordable housing at City Hall. These changes are clear just by looking at the meeting agendas that there are no changes, right? Like there is very little change that's happened regarding affordable housing. So, I encourage you to check out the City Council calendar, check out the documents in there. That's how you can really get in depth on some stuff. The thing is that this is the new system, so it only goes back to 2020. So if you want anything older, there's an old system that you can also search in, and it's a little bit clunky as well. They're both kind of clunky. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then if you want to look at old city cable, or if you want to watch the meetings, like those clips that I got, I pulled them up on city cable and I was able to record them. Now, they should have all the meetings, like the budget meetings, the city council meetings. But I noticed that a recent city council meeting wasn't on city cable because it was possible that a city council member was threatening to the public. So I think that's why it's not on there, interestingly enough. So kind of keep that in mind, that's how you can find this information, because really your voice matters. We need to hear your voice. Now, I understand talking in front of city council can be stressful. Trust me, like I'll start sweating, I get very nervous. That's just normal. When you're speaking truth to power, your voice is going to shake. That's just normal, right? You're not going to get everything right. That's just normal. But your voice needs to be out there. We need you to contribute to that. So if you need to write it out and practice, that would be advisable. Practice your 2 minutes, practice with your friends and family, let them hear it. Practice on Facebook, go on to TikTok, record that and be like, okay, here's my 2 minutes that I'm going to give in front of city council. Give specifics, but make it personal too, right? Let them know that you're a city resident, what neighborhood you live in, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's what I need you to do, right? Like make sure you have that call to action, decide if you're going to do in person or in Zoom. And then also resist distractions. That's really important, and the easy solutions that are being presented. We talked a little bit about the idea of the zoning changes, right? The city's putting zoning changes will increase affordable housing. When we actually look at it, it might actually decrease affordable housing, right? So these proposed easy solutions are not always there. And also like this weekend on Saturday, there is going to be a Cincinnati Housing Solutions Summit. And that summit is going to have multiple panels with folks who maybe are working in affordable housing. Most of them don't seem to be working in affordable housing. And again, it's a distraction. They may believe that they're doing something, but we want to know, who thinks you're going to attend. If you can put in the chat if you're planning on attending that, if you're registering. And those links to register are on our website under how to talk about the housing crisis. So if you're interested in the housing summit this weekend on Saturday, you can check that out. We think that it would be great if people spoke up when you get a chance to say, look, we need affordable housing. Even if you don't get a chance and your BS meter's going off, right? And you're reading the room and other folks are also saying, this doesn't sound right. Speak up, let people know. If there's someone on a panel who you think could benefit from hearing from one of our speakers or attending one of our trainings or watching this video, right? Share that information with them because we know that while it's complex, it's very simple. There's a great need for affordable housing, and having a symposium isn't going to solve that. We know what will solve that, and that's funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's by creating jobs with livable wages and making sure the jobs that exist have livable wages, and by having housing protection. So make sure that while you're thinking about the transit, there's going to be a panel on transit, there's going to be a panel on this, that, and the other. How do those panel topics address the need for affordable housing? How do those panel topics address the need for livable wages? And how do those panel topics address the need for housing protections? And if they don't do that, then we're just being distracted. And understand that those distractions can be the reason why you don't speak up. So you need to make sure that you break through those. And Josh just put in the chat a link to sign up for the housing forum, and he's asking, please go and share the truth and make sure that they're not just pulling the wool over our eyes and saying, oh, we're dealing with this, just wait, this will happen in time, when the need is today. People's lives are being cut short today. When we have the memorial in December, if we had worked on this, had this trust fund up and running a year ago, there are people on that list that wouldn't be on that list. That have passed away this year. So make sure that you're paying attention to that kind of stuff as well. So there are additional videos. I've been talking about these throughout the whole time on our YouTube, on the Homeless Coalition YouTube, the teach-in on issue 3. I highly suggest it if you really want to get in depth on what the city is trying to do and what our trust fund's trying to do and all that kind of stuff. The density and zoning on affordable housing, that's really important because ultimately, unless there's a way to make sure that there's affordable housing, it's not just going to happen. The market is not going to solve the problem the market created, right? So we can't just rely on a free market because that's got us into the situation in the first place. And then also watching the video about hedge funds, home ownership, and Gen Z. I think it's really important that you check that out because over the last year or 2 or 3 years, we've seen companies like Vision and Beyond purchase over 2,000 units of housing. And their explicit goal is to turn affordable housing into market rate housing. And our city subsidies and the way that we work towards housing will benefit them. And they specifically said that we, Vision and Beyond, came to Cincinnati because it was an eviction-friendly location. So keeping that in mind, that until we have those housing protections, we're going to have huge amounts of money coming in through hedge funds and international investors, like the Canadian Mounted Police, which is, using their retirement to buy single-family and properties in the United States because they know people will pay rent on them forever, right? And so these investors are coming in and buying thousands upon thousands of properties across this country and turning it from affordable into market, and that's their goal. So, don't forget about our trainings, our tours, our speakers, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to hear a little bit here from Kenyatta, just a minute or so.
First of all, quality housing. Second of all, community members who are willing to work together to build something, to work with our city leaders to improve the human experience. I think that's the best of everything. When you work to build things together, that creates relationships that lend themselves into many other areas. But am I a kumbaya kind of person? Yeah. I think we all can get along. We only have one planet. It's not, we don't have to go to Venus for anything or send to Mars to get anything. We have one planet to share, and it's big enough for all of us to have a little piece of it that we can call home and feel secure in that home and not live under the threat of being thrown out through no fault of your own. You know, we deserve that as human beings, all of us. And I'm willing to fight and advocate for that.
And hopefully you are as well. So we're going to go through really quickly some of the arguments that we've heard against the trust fund. And I don't know if Josh, if you want to chime in on any of these, that's totally open to do that. So one of the biggest argument that we seem to hear is that, you know, we don't need more taxes, right? You know, and the reality is taxes are investments in our future. I think most people understand that. And there is not a level playing field for people. And what the taxes help do is hopefully they would help level the playing field. Another one we hear that money could be mismanaged. And one of the things Josh just put in the chat, the different topics for the panels for this Saturday's Housing Solutions Summit. But when we look at, you know, money being mismanaged, part of it is, I want to say, well, is the city really managing money very well in the first place? We could look at the city's budget, and hopefully you take a chance to do that and see, you know, where our priorities are, right? Our budget is our priority. And often that priority, as it looks right now, is to protect wealth versus, you know, making sure that the folks who need the most support are actually getting it. So we want to make sure that the Community Control Board makes the recommendations, and has the audits, has publicly accessible information. But there are successful trust funds that exist all throughout the country. So this is something that, you know, we can work on. There was a concern that maybe people won't be able to access things like rental support, mortgage support, or even just housing in general. And what we're fortunate in Cincinnati that we have the Homeless Coalition in our member organizations. We have people who are working with people that are experiencing homelessness, that are experiencing housing and food insecurity, that are, you know, boots on the ground, who will be able to mitigate those kinds of issues, those barriers with technology. Another issue that people have said is, well, maybe it's too much on administrative costs. But the reality is an independent organization needs to be created to disperse the funds. We can't rely on the city to do it. The city is not even allowed to do it because of the way that the funds are set up. But we need to have that, and that community board, input board is really important. And then finally, the city is already supporting affordable housing. Hopefully, if you've been listening, you know that that is almost a complete lie. I don't want to be hyperbolic here. They do provide some properties, some gap financing, things like that for projects. However, the reality is most of the money is federally sourced money that the city puts towards any type of affordable housing. And we also know that the numbers that they claim are wildly inaccurate, and the city itself does not produce affordable housing. And the gain that they claim is not even enough to make a difference or a dent in how much affordable housing we are losing. So we are going to kind of turn it over now to have a conversation, and I am going to stop this on Facebook. So thank you everybody for watching this. Please check out our website, cincyhomeless.org, where we'll have this presentation and this video under the How to Talk About the Housing Crisis, which also has links on how to sign up to talk at the final budget hearing, as well as the city council meetings that are coming up this month and in August. We need to put the pressure on City Council to put the Affordable Housing Trust Fund back onto the ballot, the funding for it, as well as the mechanism, the board of controlling that funding, and making sure that we are putting the money where the greatest need is, not where it's just easiest or where it's in benefit of the folks that have the most money, right? We don't want to keep amplifying wealth. We want to make sure that we are meeting the need. So thank you so much. And once again, I'm Dr. Mark with the Homeless Coalition here in Cincinnati. Just know that you are valued and have a great day.